Forget everything you thought you knew about individual identity. We're about to dive into Carl Jung's most mind-bending concept, the collective unconscious. This isn't just theory, it's the radical idea that we all share an innate, ancestral wisdom. Prepare to see how seemingly disparate cultures are woven together by universal archetypes, proving that ancient truths are embedded within our very being. There is a certain quiet that settles in a room like this, late at night, when the world outside has surrendered to the darkness and the only sounds are the rustle of turning pages and the low hum of a solitary lamp. It's a scholar's quiet, a silence not of emptiness, but of immense, teeming potential. My entire life has been spent in rooms like this one, dedicated to the noble pursuit of the known, the verifiable, the catalogued. History, anthropology, linguistics, these were my tools, and with them, I sought to build a logical, linear bridge to the past, to understand humanity by its tangible artifacts, its recorded words, its traceable migrations. I believed, with the steadfast certainty of the rigorously trained academic, that the human story was one of cause and effect, of cultural diffusion and environmental adaptation. We are, I contended, products of our immediate circumstances, our minds a blank slate at birth, written upon by parents, teachers, and society. The idea that we might carry something more within us, something ancient and inherited, was a notion I relegated to the dusty shelves of mysticism and poetic fancy. And yet, it was here, in this fortress of logic, that I began a journey that would shatter its very foundations. It began, as so many intellectual obsessions do, with a single, tantalizing name, Carl Jung, and with him, his most audacious, most untestable, and most profound proposition, the collective unconscious. The theory, in its elegant simplicity, is staggering. Jung proposed that beneath our personal unconscious, the repository of our own forgotten memories and repressed experiences, there lies a deeper, universal layer. This layer is not individual but shared by all of humanity. It is a psychic inheritance, a common wellspring of primal images, instincts, and predispositions passed down from our most ancient ancestors. He called the contents of this shared mind archetypes, universal patterns and motifs like the hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the great mother. These, he argued, are the invisible architects of our myths, our religions, our dreams, and even the fundamental structures of our own personalities. For years, I treated this concept as a beautiful metaphor, a powerful literary device for understanding the recurring themes in world mythology, but nothing more. It was a fascinating intellectual curio, but to suggest it was a biological or spiritual reality felt like a leap into the abyss, a betrayal of the empirical principles that had guided my entire career. I was content to study it from a safe distance, to admire its architecture without ever believing it was a place one could actually inhabit. I had no idea that the abyss was about to stare back. As we embark on this journey, I want you to think about your own life. Is there a symbol, a dream, or a story that has followed you, one that feels older and deeper than your own experience? Share it in the comments below. Let's see what patterns emerge from our own collective. My initial resistance to the collective unconscious as a literal truth was not born of ignorance, but of discipline. The scientific method is a demanding and jealous master. It demands evidence, repeatability, and falsifiability. How could one possibly prove the existence of a shared psychic reservoir? You can't put the collective unconscious under a microscope or measure it with an fMRI. Its supposed manifestations, myths, dreams, religious symbols, are far more easily explained by more grounded theories. The hero's journey, for instance, a pattern found in stories from Gilgamesh to Star Wars, doesn't require a mystical archetype. It could simply be that this narrative structure is an effective way to transmit cultural values of courage and perseverance, a product of convergent cultural evolution rather than a pre-existing psychic template. The serpent symbol, found in nearly every culture on Earth, doesn't need to be an innate archetype of transformation and danger. Snakes are a real physical threat in many parts of the world, and their unique biology, shedding their skin, provides a potent and obvious metaphor for rebirth. Cultural diffusion, the simple spread of ideas from one group to another through trade, conquest, and migration, seemed a far more parsimonious explanation for the similarities in global myths than some spooky, invisible mind meld. My rational mind had built an impregnable fortress of counter-arguments. I was a cartographer of the known world, and Jung was asking me to believe in a phantom continent, marked on the map with the ancient warning, "Here be dragons." But a mapmaker's integrity is challenged not by what is known, but by what is anomalous. And an anomaly had entered my life. It started in my dreams. It was always the same. I would find myself in a vast, circular library with no discernible entrance or exit. The shelves stretched up into an impossible darkness, and the books had no titles. A profound sense of anxiety would grip me, a feeling of being both the keeper of this library and its eternal prisoner. And then, I would see it, etched into the floor at the center of the great room, a symbol that pulsed with a soft, internal light. A serpent, luminous and immense, coiled into a perfect circle, devouring its own tail. The Ouroboros. Upon waking, I would dismiss it. I was researching ancient symbolism, so of course, my subconscious was simply processing the data. It was textbook Freudian dreamwork, a manifestation of my personal anxieties about the cyclical, perhaps futile, nature of my academic pursuits. It was my dream about my life. But it persisted. Night after night, the same circular library, the same untitled books, the same luminous serpent. The feeling it evoked began to change. The anxiety was slowly replaced by a sense of profound, silent wisdom. The serpent wasn't a threat, it was a statement. It was a self-contained truth, a perfect equation of existence. I tried to analyze it away, to reduce it to a psychological tick, but it resisted. It felt impersonal. It felt older than me, older than my anxieties, older than the very language I was using to describe it. It was an image of such power and completeness that my personal, individual consciousness felt like a mere vessel for it. The fortress of my logic had found its first crack, not from an external argument, but from an internal, undeniable, and utterly irrational experience. The mapmaker had found a dragon, not on some distant shore, but in the very heart of his own, supposedly charted territory. A mapmaker, when faced with an anomaly, has two choices: ignore it and preserve the integrity of the old map, or investigate it and risk having to redraw the entire world. I chose to investigate. I decided to chase the serpent. My quest began not in some exotic locale, but here, in the hallowed silence of libraries and digital archives, the domain I knew best. I started with the Ouroboros in its most well-documented context, European alchemy. There it was, in the drawings of the 16th and 17th centuries, a central symbol for the alchemical magnum opus. It represented the cyclical nature of the work, the idea that the end of the process was the beginning, that prima materia, the starting substance, was one and the same with the philosopher's stone, the end goal. It was the motto, "All is one," a visual representation of eternity and the unity of opposites, creation and destruction, life and death, locked in an eternal, self-sustaining embrace. This was fascinating, but still comfortably within the realm of cultural transmission. The alchemists of Europe were a relatively small, interconnected community. They read each other's work, copied each other's symbols. It was a closed loop. My skepticism remained intact, albeit intrigued. Then, I widened the net. I turned my attention to ancient Egypt, thousands of years before the European alchemists. There, in a text found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, the enigmatic Book of the Netherworld, is a depiction of the sun god Ra's nocturnal journey, his union with Osiris in the underworld to be reborn at dawn. And encompassing this entire scene, forming a protective, circular boundary, is a massive serpent. Some Egyptologists have identified this as an early form of the Ouroboros, representing the endless cycle of time and the contained wholeness of the universe. The connection to the alchemical symbol was striking, but still, a historian could argue for a long, slow thread of influence, a trickle of ideas flowing from the Nile Valley into Greco-Roman thought and eventually, into the esoteric traditions of Europe. The map was getting bigger, but the lines of connection were still traceable, however faint. It was when I leaped across the ocean, across millennia, to a culture that had absolutely no contact with the old world, that the map began to tear. I was examining Mesoamerican cosmology, specifically the Aztec and Mayan belief systems. There, I found the concept of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan. While often depicted in other forms, certain codices and stone carvings show a feathered serpent biting its own tail, forming a circle. In this context, it represented the boundary between the earthly realm and the celestial, the cyclical nature of time as understood in their complex calendar systems, and the unity of sky and earth. There was no conceivable way a 14th-century Aztec priest could have been reading a copy of an Egyptian funerary text or a 17th-century alchemical manuscript. The continents were separated by an impassable ocean and thousands of years of independent development. And yet, here was the same fundamental idea, the same impossible geometry of a serpent forming a circle by consuming itself, representing the same core concepts: cyclical time, wholeness, and the union of opposites. My tidy lines of cultural diffusion were in tatters. This wasn't a thread of influence, it was a pattern emerging spontaneously from the depths of the human psyche, in cultures utterly alien to one another. I felt a sense of vertigo, the kind you get when you stand on a cliff edge and the solid ground you trusted suddenly feels precarious. The serpent wasn't just a symbol in these cultures, it was a symbol of them, a testament to some shared, underlying blueprint for making sense of the world. From there, the floodgates opened. I found the world serpent Jormungandr in Norse mythology, so vast it encircled the entire world, Midgard, and bit its own tail. I found echoes of it in Hindu cosmology, in the dragons that circle the base of the cosmic Mount Meru. The locations on my map were no longer connected by neat, straight lines of trade routes and migrations. Instead, they were like pinpricks of light, all shining with the same glow, with no visible wires connecting them. The only possible connection was an invisible one, running not across the earth, but through the minds of the people who lived upon it. The dream serpent was no longer just my dream. It was humanity's dream. And for the first time in my life, I felt the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that Jung was not a poet, but a cartographer of a continent that exists within us all. The culmination of this journey did not happen in a flash of lightning or with the discovery of some final, definitive text. It happened here, in this very chair, surrounded by the silent testament of my research. The sun had long set, and the room was a chaotic landscape of open books, printouts of petroglyphs, and hand-drawn maps covered in arrows that looped back on themselves, forming their own dizzying Ouroboros. My mind was a maelstrom of facts, dates, and images: the alchemist's furnace, the Egyptian solar barge, the blood-soaked steps of an Aztec pyramid, the icy fjords of the Norsemen. I was trying, one last time, to force it all into a logical framework, to find the loose thread, the exception that would allow me to dismiss the entire pattern as a grand, seductive coincidence. I closed my eyes, exhausted, leaning my head back. I wasn't meditating or seeking a vision, I was simply surrendering to the intellectual fatigue. And in that surrender, the walls of the room, the walls of my own mind, seemed to dissolve. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a shift in perception, as if the focus of my inner eye had suddenly zoomed out from the individual trees to see the entire forest, the entire planet, the entire sweep of human history, all at once. The storm of facts in my head stilled, and in its place, there was a river. A great, silent, impossibly vast river of consciousness. It wasn't made of water, but of images, feelings, and stories. I saw it flowing from the shadows of prehistory, from the firelight of the first human caves. Within its currents, I saw the archetypes, not as abstract concepts, but as living, dynamic forces. I saw the hero, 1,000 faces from Gilgamesh to Luke Skywalker, stepping out of his village, not because of a cultural trope, but because a primal, universal impulse for growth and self-discovery was pushing him from within. I saw the shadow, the dark brother, the trickster, the disavowed part of ourselves, lurking in the epics of every culture, in the villains of our films, and in the mirror of my own self-doubt. I saw the Great Mother, nurturing and devouring, in the forms of Isis, of Pachamama, of Mother Mary, and of the raw, untamed force of nature herself. And there, flowing through it all, was the serpent. It was the very current of the river, the principle of its flow, the endless cycle of death and rebirth, the energy that coiled through every myth, powered every transformation. It wasn't a symbol of the river, it was the river. In that moment, the distinction between me and humanity collapsed. My own consciousness, the voice in my head I called I, felt like a small eddy, a temporary whirlpool in this immense, ancient current. My dream of the circular library wasn't my dream, it was the river showing me its own nature. The untitled books were the countless individual lives that draw from this common source, each telling a unique story but written in the same universal language of archetypes. The anxiety I had felt was the ego's fear of dissolving into this larger whole, the prisoner's fear of his own liberation. The overwhelming feeling was not one of losing myself, but of finding myself in everything. It was a profound homecoming. The knowledge of the alchemist, the awe of the Egyptian priest, the existential dread of the Norse poet, it wasn't just something I had studied, it was, in some infinitesimal yet undeniable way, a part of my own psychic DNA. I had inherited their questions, their symbols, their answers. The weight of 100,000 years of human experience, of joy, sorrow, love, and fear, was not a story in a book, but a living presence within me. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was filled with the silent roar of that great river, a hum of shared meaning that connected every soul that has ever been or ever will be. I opened my eyes. The room was the same. The books, the maps, the single lamp cutting through the darkness. But I was not. The mapmaker had not just redrawn the world, he had discovered that the map was, and always had been, alive. In the days and weeks that followed that silent, shattering revelation, the world began to reorganize itself before my eyes. It was as if I had been colorblind my whole life and had suddenly been given the ability to see the full spectrum. The academic pursuit of knowledge, which had once felt like an archaeological dig for dead facts, now felt like a conversation with living intelligences. The conflict between my rational mind and this new intuitive understanding didn't result in a victory for one over the other. Instead, they began a slow, careful dance of integration. My analytical skills were not discarded, they were repurposed. I was no longer using them to debunk the mystery, but to better understand its grammar, to trace the syntax of the archetypes as they manifested in the world around me. And they were everywhere. I started seeing them not just in ancient myths, but in the relentless churn of the 24-hour news cycle. A political scandal would erupt, and I would see the classic drama of the king and the wasteland, the idea that the sickness of the ruler is reflected in the sickness of the land. A story would break about a whistleblower exposing corporate malfeasance, and I would see the archetype of the truth-teller, or the Promethean figure who steals fire from the gods, the powerful, and gives it to humanity, often at great personal cost. The stock market's manic-depressive swings between irrational exuberance and panicked fear felt like the primal pulse of a collective psyche, driven by the archetypal forces of greed and terror. It was uncanny. It was as if humanity was doomed or blessed to endlessly reenact the same fundamental stories, just with new costumes and new technologies. My personal life also became a new text to be read. I looked at the dynamics within my own family and saw the archetypes playing out in plain sight. The stern but protective father, the nurturing mother, the rebellious son, the wise and eccentric grandfather who seemed to dispense wisdom from some timeless source. These weren't just roles people were playing, they were psychic structures, invisible scripts they were unconsciously following. Even my own internal landscape became clearer. I began to recognize my shadow, those parts of myself I projected onto others, my impatience with people I deemed illogical, my hidden arrogance, my fear of failure. By recognizing it as an archetype, as a universal part of the human condition and not just a personal failing, I could finally begin to engage with it, to integrate its energy rather than repress it. The Ouroboros, my dream serpent, had taught me its lesson. The shadow wasn't something to be destroyed, but to be eaten, to be consumed and integrated into a larger, more complete self. The world had not changed, but my relationship to it had been fundamentally transformed. The feeling of academic and personal isolation I had harbored for so long had vanished, replaced by a profound sense of participation. I was not a detached observer cataloging a dead past. I was a participant in a living, breathing, ongoing myth. The stories in my books were not just about them back then. They were about us right now. Every movie I watched, every novel I read, every conversation I had, became an opportunity to see these ancient patterns ripple to the surface. It was the ultimate resolution, the realization that the wisdom of the ages is not locked away in forgotten tombs or inaccessible libraries. It is here, now, encoded in the very structure of our minds, shaping our experiences, waiting for us to recognize its presence. The quest for knowledge had led me out of the library and into the world, and shown me that the two were, and always had been, one and the same. So, we come back to the central question that began this entire journey. Are we all connected by ancient wisdom? Having stood on the far shore of my skepticism and looked back, I can now answer with a conviction that transcends mere intellectual belief. Yes, we are. We are connected by a fabric of myth, symbol, and instinct that is as real and as vital as our own DNA. This collective unconscious is not a supernatural fantasy. It is the psychological bedrock of our species, a shared inheritance that whispers to us in our dreams, guides our creative impulses, and structures our deepest understanding of life, death, and everything in between. My journey, which started as an academic exercise to debunk a fringe theory, became a deeply personal pilgrimage. It forced me to confront the limits of my own rational mind and to accept that some truths are not meant to be dissected, but experienced. The Ouroboros that haunted my sleep was not a pathology, it was an invitation. It was a key, handed to me from the depths of our shared past, unlocking a door I never knew existed. And behind that door was not chaos or madness, but a profound and beautiful order, the order of the human soul, written across millennia. What does this mean for us, here, in our fragmented and often chaotic modern world? It means we are not as alone as we feel. It means that the struggles you face, your fears, your longing for meaning, are not yours alone. They are part of a great, universal human drama. The courage you need can be found in the thousand-faced hero that lives within you. The wisdom you seek can be heard in the silent voice of the sage that is a part of your ancestral inheritance. The potential for transformation and rebirth is embodied in the serpent that eternally consumes and renews itself in the depths of your own psyche. This is the ultimate gift of Jung's discovery. It doesn't just explain the past, it empowers the present. It tells us that we have access to a reservoir of strength, creativity, and wisdom that is vastly older and deeper than our individual, fleeting lives. It is a call to listen to your dreams, to pay attention to the stories and symbols that resonate with you, to look for the archetypal patterns playing out in your own life and in the world at large. Because in doing so, you are not just engaging in self-analysis, you are participating in a conversation with the whole of humanity. You are tapping into a source of ancient wisdom that has the power to heal, to guide, and to unite us. We are all leaves on a single ancient tree, and while we may feel separate, we are all drawing nourishment from the same deep roots. My work now is no longer about cataloging the past. It is about reminding us of this living connection, of this incredible, shared inheritance. The greatest library in the universe is not made of stone or paper, it is within you. And you already hold a library card,